Hello, my name is Steve Evans, and I'd like to welcome you to Matters of the Heart. This is a show where we talk about the mind-body connection and why your heart matters where your health is concerned. And with me today in the studio is Angela McCurdy, a longtime Savannah native, and someone who, along with me and many others in the area, have been discovering truths that actually release our heart so that we've been coming into better health through that mind-body connection which God placed into us. Are you aware that medical science has been proving that there's a direct connection between the negative emotions that we walk around in and the emotion and the things and the ways that our bodies stress out and break down in many of the health conditions that are so prevalent today? Angela, have you had some experience with this?
I'm walking firsthand knowledge in the fact that my emotions were almost literally destroying my body. I mean, I guess anger's my thing, and I've walked in it for so many years, but never understood the ill effects that it was having on my body till it was addressed when I woke up one day and I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired that I decided I needed to look at something quite differently than what I was doing.
Well, with me, it began 25 years ago when I first became a Christian, and I saw a lot of the minor health issues that were with me disappear when I came into that marvelous early peace of Christ. Right. And then as I began to stress up again and walk away from the peace without trying to. Folks, I don't know how it is with you, but it's just easy to walk away from the peace that God gives us. And until I learned the way to walk in more peace, I began to get a lot of the diseases back that have been tracking with me, especially sinus conditions.
You know, the funny thing is about stress, when I'm stressed out, it actually raises my anger level. So, I mean, it really kind of compounds one over the other. And there are people that are walking around with anger drawn in and do not realize that they're angry, and it's stressing their bodies out, and they don't understand why they're sick.
Well, I think this is something that blindsides us, and that's why it's a message that we've been wanting to bring to a wider audience, because we just have this sneaking suspicion that a lot of people will acknowledge there's a mind-body connection.
That's right.
But when it comes down to saying that the disease I have may be implicated by negative emotions that I've been living with, it's hard to take that one last step.
That's right.
And yet, medical science since the 50s has been showing a relationship between the flight or fight syndrome and the breakdown of our bodies through the stress response. So, do you have any information about that?
Well,
that you brought in for us today?
Yeah, I did. I did a search on the internet last night, and I found the American Institute of Stress. I just love this. This was really good. And I was quite surprised at. I'm going to give you just a recap here. The effects of stress affect your hair, your brain, your mouth, your heart, your lungs, your muscles, your digestive tract, your skin, and your reproductive organs. I mean, it was amazing that nothing escapes.
Nothing escapes.
No, nothing escapes at all. But here's what it really impacted the stress issue. It said there are numerous emotional and physical disorders that have been linked to stress, including depression, anxiety, heart attacks, stroke, hypertension, immune system disturbances that increase susceptibility to infections, a host of viral-linked disorders ranging from the common cold and herpes to AIDS, and certain cancers as well as autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. I mean, it is absolutely incredible how much it attacks the skin through rashes and hives, the gastrointestinal system through bowel problems and colitis, and it can contribute to insomnia, degenerative neurological disorders like Parkinson's disease. In fact, it's hard to think of any of the diseases in which stress cannot play an aggravating role in our body, and it's incredible what it does.
Well, I had a quote from a medical doctor in the last show in which he was talking about every stress response we have ends up at an organ level and at a cellular level. Now that's so extraordinary. It's absolutely mind-blowing to think how deeply connected everything in our body is with what we allow in our heart. And one of the things I've been reading from the secular scientists, the scientific community rather, is that it's not just a matter of what the outward things of stress are, but it's a matter of what do we believe about, what do we perceive about what we're going through. So the issue of what our hearts believe, what we think about the situations that we're in has a great deal to do with how stressed we are. For instance, you could be sitting at a table just like this and be completely unstressed. But if you got bright lights and a camera on you, you might feel your stress level rising a little bit.
And you're going through severe hot flashes, and there's no air, and there's heat coming down to you. That's going to rise the stress.
And you know, it's kind of, it would be funny if it's not just the way that we live, because if we could just see our situations for what they are, we might not be as stressed, but we imagine them to be far more desperate than they actually are at the moment, and our stress level can rise accordingly. And it affects everything. I've got an interesting statistic here from a pastor. I've got a book by a doctor that sounds like a pastor wrote it, and I've got a book by a pastor that sounds like a doctor wrote it. It's called In His Own Image by a pastor out in Alaska named Art Mathias. And he works in this area of helping people with the emotions that they've trapped inside, oftentimes out of trauma, and the negative emotions that are so often the stuff of daily life. He helps them, just like we do through our ministry, to come out of those emotions, and they see people getting well of all kinds of diseases. But he says here that the evidence that stress raises cholesterol levels is abundant. Now, we're all concerned about our hearts, our physical hearts. We're concerned rightly about cholesterol levels. But are you aware, home audience, that stress raises cholesterol levels? Not only that, but elevated cholesterol does not increase the risk of heart disease unless it's combined with stress. Simply put, if blood cholesterol levels are high, stress will much more likely contribute to heart disease if the blood cholesterol levels are high. On the other hand, if stress levels are kept low, even high cholesterol will probably not result in heart disease, and he's quoting a study from 1996.
You know, we hear so much about stress. We hear the word stress. We hear the word stress in driving, stress at home, stress on the job. We hear that word so much, but what is stress? Can you define it?
Well, let's see. Stress. I've got something over here. I would say anything, from a Christian point of view, anything that takes us away from the peace of Christ is indicating that stress has come inside of us. But those external situations, or even things that we look at on the inside, one person may look back over something they've done in the past and realize that they've received forgiveness from the Lord for that.
Right.
And therefore they can see their past, and especially certain situations that they've brought to the Lord, and not have any stress when they remember it. But if you've got a shame-filled memory of things in the past, that's going to be a stress reaction in the body. Same thing, but the difference has been you've received forgiveness. On the other hand, let's say somebody has hurt you and you've forgiven them. You can see them again and not have a stress reaction.
That's
true.
But
if you haven't forgiven them, anger may come up, frustration, hurt feelings may arise,
everything.
Blame and bitterness may arise. These are stress reactions in the body. So stress is, you can see it outwardly, but it's the inward experience of stress that is the telling thing, and it's the thing that the body's going to pick up on.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
There are events like moving a house. You've moved house a lot.
Yes.
I'll tell you, I noticed the difference between my wife and I. It's like when the opportunity came for move, for me, it was like, oh boy, we get to travel, we get to go to a new place. And my wife said one time, do you realize this is the 17th move we made? And right away, I knew that I was in trouble, because it wasn't, to her idea of the stress was, it wasn't a pleasant experience. And so she was going to go through that time a lot differently than I was, unless the Lord could rescue her heart.
It pulled her roots. She left all things familiar. She's got to pack all those boxes, and it's just the stress level goes up and up and up and up.
Yeah. So it's how you perceive the same event can be stress-filled. Here's a good example from the Bible. The disciples in the boat on the Sea of Galilee, when the wind hit them and the waves went high, they went into a stress reaction. They completely flipped out. And what was Jesus doing?
Sleeping.
He was sleeping. They were more stressed when they found that out than by anything the wind was doing. It's like, Lord, what are you doing? You should be like panicking like the rest of us. And yet he had a peace that went beyond their understanding. And now he says that same peace can be given to us. So that's what we try to work with when we help people who come into our classes to deal with their emotional issues so that they can get more peace.
You know, and the peace of Christ for each individual, it's hard for me to describe what that is to someone else, because I can tell you how it alleviates all of that stress, those negative emotions in me. But the peace of Christ is so much more contented to be than to allow this to come in and play havoc on your body.
Oh yeah, the peace is what we need. In place of that, we have the Mayo Clinic here, for instance. In a study I've got, stress unhealthy response to the pressures of life. Now, the peace of Christ, that would be the healthy response. And he's saying just 10 minutes of watching the news can make your stress levels soar. And it can, unless you take the news to a place of prayer, and then you recover from the Lord as an intercessor for situations that we see in the world, a peace, because we're lifting concerns up to him. But I have to agree with the Mayo Clinic. If we're just watching the news, your heart can sink and go down and down and down unless you combine prayer and faith with it. So right there, the television dial can bring you into stress, or if you leave it off, you might be doing fine. Now, instead of protecting you, the Mayo Clinic says that your body's response to stress, if constantly activated, that's the key word, is that an acute thing, highly focused over some definite and dangerous event that needs to be dealt with, and so we need all those hormones being released inside of us, or is a chronic thing? Is it going on long term? Because if it's constantly activated, it may make you more vulnerable to life-threatening health problems, and it can suppress the digestive system, the reproductive system, growth processes. And they describe both physical threats and psychological threats as leading into stress situation. But it's that long-term activation, they say, that can disrupt almost all our body's processes, increasing our risk of obesity, insomnia, digestive problems, heart disease, depression, memory impairment, which is pretty widely spread these days among folks who are active in the world.
Yes.
And it's not just so much a factor of age as being active in the world right now, because as the stress level goes up, oftentimes the ability to remember things can go down, and then physical illness and other implications. Now, what they say is when you experience chronic stress, there are things that you can begin to do to come out of it. There are ways to manage stress, and they number exercise, relaxation techniques, healthy nutritional choices, and a social support networks, and
That's
of course
correct.
seeing psychiatrists.
That's correct.
But we have something in addition to that, folks. We have found that there are ways of relating to our negative emotions as the very things that carry us away from the peace of Christ. So that by grappling with the negative emotions, and oftentimes the trauma that lays behind them gives them power, that we can respond to them as a temptation, come back into the peace of Christ, and find a good deal more health. How does that sound like?
Well, it sounds wonderful for me.
That sounds like something we need to get into
Yes,
in the next 15
That's
minutes.
exactly
so
right.
for right now, we're going to take a break.